بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, peace and the blessing of God and His grace upon each and every one of you. I am Azzuddin Gad and this is your program Reflections on Islam. Today, God willing, we would like to share with you Quran recitation by Qari Mahmoud Khalil al-Husari. A brief reflection on Woman in the Islamic Sharia law, her rights and obligations, part number 1. And we conclude the program with our dua supplication. Within the Islamic system, God places the woman in an honorable position. No other system, sacred or secular, can offer her. This is very clear throughout the whole Quran, but in particular in 10 chapters, one of which is called the Women. That is chapter number 4. Other chapters include Al-Baqarah, Al-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah, Al-Nur, Al-Ahzab, Al-Mujadilah, Al-Mumtahana, Al-Talaq, Al-Tahrim, and so on and so forth. Yet some people spread lies about the status of the woman in Islam, alleging that the system denies her rights, while they ignore God's words in verses like number 228 of chapter 2, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Women have rights equitable to the duties they owe in kindness. It seems that it is not the truth that they want, but fanaticism which comes from non-Muslims and few Muslims who blindly follow whatever the enemy gives them, even if it is bad, and reject what God gives them, which is good for them. Enemies of Islam have fiercely attacked Muslims and forced some to abandon their commercial and penal laws. Now they spread seeds of doubts with false stories about the status of the woman in Islam. They attack the Islamic family law, the virtual foundation on which the Muslim family rises to reshape the world on universal morals, ethics, and laws. So it would be fair to ask, what is the true status of the woman in Islam? In Islam, God gives the woman every good thing and protects her from bad things, so that she may not fall victim to false promises of freedoms in which non-Muslim women are trapped and exploited. If a woman under any secular system, democratic or socialist, gets a chance to reflect on her condition, she would cry for her denied dignity, her demeaned status, and the lost happiness. And when any woman faces her good, true nature, she would see her own salvation, the protection of her dignity, and the guarantee of her real rights and the respect of her honor only in Islam, God's universal system for living and worship in His kingdom. In this two-part series of reflections on Islam, we would, God willing, present a glimpse of the status of the woman in Islam, mainly from the Quran, the primary source of the Islamic Sharia law, so that you can see her respectively working side by side with the man to build the global righteous community of believers.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما وما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم ومن يعص الله ورسوله فقد ضل ضلالا مبينا صدق الله العظيم.
These are verses number 35 and 36 of chapter 33 of the Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab. And as you can see, the Quran, God's final message and eternal guidance for humankind, places the woman side by side with her twin soul mate, the man, in some of the most important aspects of life. This is not a recent discovery. It is an eternal truth which started with the origin of humankind. When the Quran mentions the origin of humankind, it reports obvious facts, as God says in verse number 1 of chapter 4, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَّفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. O humankind, reverence your Lord who created you from one soul. وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. And from it created its mate, and from them twain spread multitude of men and women. So in Islam, there is no special religious status for man or woman in their humanness. Both came from one soul. A special status, if any, could be acquired equally by both men and women through good deeds, as God says in verse number 13 of chapter 49. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى. O humankind, we created you from a male and a female. وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا, and made you into nations and tribes that you may know one another. إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. The most honored of you in the sight of God are those most righteous. Then from the man and the woman, God forms the family, the universal traditional family. So based on their common origin in humanness and their respective family roles in procreation, the man becomes walid or father, and the woman becomes walida or mother. Do you notice the clear similarity in both status? Well, in Islam, the mother and the father hold an honorable status of respect and reverence after God, as we read in verse number 23 of chapter 17, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Your Lord decreed that you serve none save Him and show kindness to parents. Then God gives the mother a special credit for her special role in carrying, nursing, and rearing the children, as He says in verse number 14 of chapter 31, ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حملته أمه وهنا على وهن. We enjoined upon man concerning his parents that his mother bears him in weakness upon weakness. وفصاله في عامين, and his weaning is within 2 years. أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير. Give thanks to me and to your parents. Unto me is the final destination. And God's last messenger and seal of prophets, Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, when a man said to him, O messenger of God, who is more entitled to my good company? The Prophet said, your mother. Who is next? The man asked. Your mother, said the Prophet. Who is next? The man asked a third time. Your mother. The Prophet said. Who is next? He asked for the fourth time, and the Prophet said, your father. The next point is human nature's need. God's commandments to honor the parent is wholesome response to human nature's need, especially for mother's affection, love, and kindness to her child. God tells us to appreciate all mothers for bearing and rearing us to become good men and women. So Islam is not only a good response to parental nature and unselfish love, but it covers all aspects of life with similar care, like the family formation and function, business transactions, and other human relations in which the woman is a principal partner. All relations should be based on scriptures and prophetic traditions with love and kindness, not oppression or exploitation. The next point is human vital needs. No one can find any contradictions in the Islamic system, which aims to guide people's conduct and refine their emotions. The Islamic system would especially be clearer for those who reach for its original sources and respect its course as God's universal system of morals, ethics, and law. So you might then wonder, where do attacks on Islam come from? Well, attacks on Islam seem to come from non-Muslims who know nothing about Islam and don't want to know. They espouse burning hatred and animosity against Islam because of their fanaticism or ignorance. They would accuse Islam of whatever they fancy with no regard for the truth. They made up their minds. They don't want to be bothered by the truth. They only want to destroy Islam if they can, but they would not. Other groups include some Muslims who blindly follow misguided interpretations of Islamic texts and events. They are stuck within rigid sects and contradictory edicts and claim those ideas to be the Sharia. This is not true. Those sects try to force people to follow their factions, even if their opinions contradict the text, the logic, the spirit, and the universal wisdom and intent of the Sharia law. So secularism and sectarianism do not only hurt their followers, but also hinder the spread of God's light to lead people from darkness to happiness. So it would be good for those groups to drop their heavy burden of secularism and sectarianism, which they espouse in blind imitation without thinking or reflection. They should also drop their claims that earlier Muslim generations left no room for later generations to study and reflect on the Quran and prophetic traditions. When they lift their blindfolds, they will not only see the Muslim woman and the Muslim man in their respective right status, but more importantly, the universality of the Islamic system for all people, all the time and everywhere. So let us consider woman's independent responsibility. As principal partner in humanity with intelligence, the woman has responsibilities independent from the man. For example, the woman is responsible for her soul, her worship, her home, her community, etc., and so on. Like the man, the woman is entitled to full reward for her good deeds, as she is subject to punishment for her bad deeds. The man's piety would not help the woman if she is bad, and his wickedness would not help her if she is good. As God makes it very clear in verses 124 of chapter 4 and 195 of chapter 3. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. Whoever does good, whether a male or a female, and is a believer, فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ وَلَا يُظْلَمُونَ نَقِيرًا. Such will enter paradise, and they will not be wrong even the dent of a date stone. فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ أَنِّي لَا أُضِيعُ عَمَلَ عَامِلٍ مِّنكُمْ. That is verse 195 chapter 3. Their Lord answered their prayer, I do not waste the work of any worker of you. مِّن ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى بَعْضُكُمْ مِّن بَعْضٍ. Whether male or female, you proceed one from another. Let us pause here for a moment to look at these wonderful divine words which say, you proceed from one another, which were revealed more than 1400 years ago. Beside their moral lessons, they may refer to recent scientific discoveries like chromosomes or sex linkage between male and female, which is a great mystery and a great gift from God. Yes, it seems that every male is part of female and every female is part male. So men and women should love each other, respect each other, and rejoice in each other's company by the grace of God. Neither the man nor the woman has inherent superiority over the other because of his or her gender. Both have a common life, respective roles, and complementary capabilities, as God says in verse number 32 of chapter 4. وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Do not covet what God has favored some of you over the others. لِلرِّجَالُ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَ. Men have a share of what they earned, and women have a share of what they earned. Another fact which people ignore is that the woman's honorable status in Islam was not a result of revolutions of the law or evolutions of the law or revolution of the masses. It is a divine truth revealed by God throughout the history of humankind based on the criteria of universal righteousness. As God says in verse number 10 of chapter 66, ضرب الله مثلا للذين كفروا امرأة نوح وامرأة لوط. God cites an example of the disbelievers, the wife of Noah and the wife of Lot. كانتا تحت عبدين من عبادنا صالحين. They were under two of our righteous servants. فخانتهما فلم يغنيا عنهما من الله شيئا. Yet they betrayed them, and their husbands could not avail them against God. وقيل ادخل النار مع الداخلين. And it was said, enter the fire with those who enter. God says Noah's wife and Lot's wife were bad example despite the status of their husbands, who were not only Muslims but prophets. On the other hand, God says Pharaoh's wife and Lady Mary, mother of Jesus, peace be upon them, are good example and models for both men and women. They set a standard in good conduct, commitment, and dedication to God and to His message, as God says in verse number 11 and 12 of chapter 66. وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا امْرَأَةَ فِرْعَوْنَ إِذْ قَالَتْ. And God cites an example of the believers, the wife of Pharaoh, who said, رَبِّ ابْنِ لِي عِنْدَكَ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَنَجِّنِي مِنْ فِرْعَوْنَ وَعَمَلِهِ. My Lord, build for me a home with you in paradise and save me from Pharaoh and his deed. وَنَجِّنِي مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. And save me from the evil-doing folk. وَمَرْيَمَ ابْنَةَ عِمْرَانَ الَّتِي أَحْسَنَتْ فَرْجَهَا. And Mary, daughter of Imran, who guarded her chaste. فَنَفَخْنَا فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِنَا وَصَدَّقَتْ بِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّهَا وَكُتُبِهِ. So we breathed therein of our spirit, and she put her faith in the words of her Lord and His books. وَكَانَتْ مِنَ الْقَانِتِينَ. And she was of the obedient. The next point to consider is woman's role in public affairs. The Muslim woman is not only responsible for herself in her personal duties, that is moral khassa, but she may participate in public affairs or collective duties al-fardul kifaya, as her time and conditions permit. For example, God placed the woman and the man side by side in performing some of the most important duties in Islam, saying in verse number 71 of chapter 9, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. Believing men and believing women are supporters of one another. يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة. They command what is right, forbid what is wrong, perform the prayer and pay the zakah. ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله. And they obey God and His Messenger, these God will have mercy on them. So, the supreme duty of calling people to goodness and preventing evil should not be left to men only. Women should take part in delivering God's message where they could be more effective than men. And both Muslim men and women must face the disbelieving and hypocrite men and women about whom God says in verse number 67 of chapter 9, وَالْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. Hypocrite men and women are supporters of one another. What do? يأمرون بالمنكر وينهون عن المعروف ويقبضون أيديهم. They command what is wrong, forbid what is right, and withhold their hands. نسوا الله فنسيهم إن المنافقين هم الفاسقون. They forgot God, so He forgot them. The hypocrites are the transgressors. Yes, as disbelieving men and women and as disbelieving and hypocrite men and women conspire to destroy the Sharia law, believing men and women should cooperate to protect their sacred system to live and worship in peace in God's kingdom. Therefore, for a man to live as a believer, he needs a believing woman beside him. And for a woman to live as a believer, she needs a believing man to live beside her. Men and women need each other's moral support and emotional fulfillment to live and worship in happiness. Next point is woman's opinion. Not only that Islam allows the woman to participate in public affairs, but also respects her opinion as an intelligent, responsible person. And here is an example. A man called Aus had an argument with his wife who named Khawla. In his anger, he said to his wife, "You are to me like my mother." In ignorance times, such words are enough to put a woman in matrimonial limbo. She is neither married to enjoy normal marital relations nor divorced to find another husband to share her life with. Khawla went to the Messenger of God and told him what happened. Then she asked, "Do you have any way to get us out of this trap?" God's messenger said, "I received no revelation concerning this. I think you have become forbidden to him." She said, "He did not mention divorce." Then she added, "This is a bad custom and it should end." Then she pleaded with the Prophet, "We have small children. If they stay with him without me, they would be lost, and if they stay with me without him, they would be lost." Then she looked up to heavens and said, "O God, to you alone do I complain. Send a solution to this problem through your Prophet." So God did, and the following words became part of God's eternal law to liberate men and women from oppressions of bad customs. God says in verse 1 and 2 of chapter 58, قد سمع الله قول التي تجادلك في زوجها وتشتكي إلى الله. God has heard her that argued with you concerning her husband and complaining to God. والله يسمع تحاوركما إن الله سميع بصير. And God hears your dialogue. God is hearer and seer. الذين يظاهرون من نسائهم ما هن أمهاتهم. Those who put away their wives by saying they are like their mothers, they are not their mothers. إن أمهاتهم إلا اللائي ولدنهم. None are their mothers except those who gave them birth. وإنهم ليقولون منكر من القول وزورا. And they utter nothing but ill word and a lie. This is now is how high the status the woman reaches when, with her intelligence and faith, God accepted her sound argument and responded positively to her fair request to abolish another bad secular custom. And please look again at how nicely God placed that woman with his prophet together as a team, arguing the case in verse number 1 of chapter 58. Closely it says, Wallahu yasma'u tahawurukuma. God hears your dialogues, both of you. So situations like this leave no doubt that the contribution of the feminine thought has always been part of the process of the Islamic Sharia law. Finally, Muslim men and women should read the last part in today's recitation very carefully to strengthen their faith and protect their rights. And it reads, let us look at it again, it is 36 of chapter 33, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا. It is not for a believing man or woman, when God and His Messenger decree the matter, أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ, that they have another choice after that. وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. So whoever disobeys God and His Messenger has clearly gone far astray. Yes, we should not put our wisdom above the wisdom of God and messengers. We should accept the decrees and commandments of God and His messengers loyally and carry them out faithfully, because fortunate are those whose inclination agree with God's will. As Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, put it, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به, which means none of you truly believes until his inclination coincides with what I brought. And these are the Book of God and the Sunnah tradition of His Messenger. Thank you today for letting us into your home to share with you this particular program about the status of the woman in Islam from the Quran and prophetic tradition, the original sources of the Islamic Sharia law. And we hope that you will tune in next week, God willing, to share part number 2 on the same issue, to expand more and see more rights and responsibilities of the woman within the Islamic society. To conclude today's program, please share the dua with us. And it says, Allahumma nas'aluka ilman nafi'an wa amalan mutaqabbalan wa rizqan halalan tayyiban. Amen. O God, grant us useful knowledge, acceptable deeds, and good wholesome provisions. Amen. Until next time, may the blessings and peace of God be with you at all times. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.